So first of all, we got an amazing panel tonight. This is very interesting for me to be here because I was here in 2011, not here, but on the campus, and we did a thing called Terminator Vision about augmented reality and virtual reality and everything. And things have changed a lot in the last 5 years or so. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with just a little bit of a kind of recap and kind of set the tone for why we're here. I mean, how many of you are entrepreneurs in the audience? And wait, entrepreneurs, not unemployed. They're scarily similar, but that's okay. I am also an entrepreneur / fortunately not right now unemployed, so don't worry. It's not the pot calling the kettle black. So basically, what we're here for tonight is we want to take advantage of this amazing panel we have to learn about what the opportunities are for those of you who are entrepreneurs, and then whatever the rest of you do that didn't raise your hand, to figure out where are the opportunities. We're going to talk about funding. We're going to talk about starting companies. We're going to talk about the technologies. We're talking about everything. And we also have the ability, as you all know, for you to submit questions from the audience. So if you follow those instructions, they're going to appear on this tablet later, and then we'll make sure that we take plenty of time for those. So here's the thing. This was my first augmented reality experience. And you laugh, but it's true, because it looks something like this. And you could go to all these amazing places in the world. And now, see, you guys were kind of laughing, but your augmented reality experience looks like this. And you can also go to all these amazing places in the world. But the reason I bring those up to kind of counterpoint them is we live in the greatest time to be alive. Never before has there been so much technology, so readily available. It's cheap, it's fast, it's powerful. You can create almost anything you want. And that's incredibly empowering. But it's important to kind of understand what the frame of reference is for those opportunities. What is the context around those opportunities? Just because we can create everything may not mean that we should. There may be things that everybody talks about that we should create that you have thought of completely different ideas, or maybe that nobody's thought about. So virtual reality has come obviously a long way, and there's a bright future. And augmented reality has come a long way too. Does anybody know what this is? Aside from Glenn, who instantly recognized it. So this is one of the first augmented reality headsets. And what you saw, if you were looking through it, looked kind of like this, which you don't think is impressive, but in like 1960, I believe is the correct date, this was pretty cool. And now what do we have? Well, we've got things like this, right? The power of a supercomputer in the palm of your hands, and we can do awesome things like Pokemon Go. That was sarcasm, just in case you missed it. But that's one of the points, right? Gaming isn't the only thing we can do. With VR, it's not the only thing we can do with AR. There's a million opportunities out there. And while there's things like the PlayStation VR headset that everybody's hyping, and there's a lot of gaming things, there's a bright future for VR. We don't just want to focus on that tonight. We also have some panelists we want to talk to about AR, and there's a bright future there as well. But what does the future look like? Any guesses? This. That's what the future looks like. It's not a joke. That's what we're here for tonight. We're here to inspire you. We're here to get you to think about opportunities, to get you to think about ideas, to get you to think about the technologies, the issues with the market, the things that have happened in the past, the promises that have been fulfilled and unfulfilled. This is about getting you to leave this audience tonight and be inspired, but go take action on that inspiration. So we're going to go ahead and get started with a presentation by our featured startup. And once we do that, then we're going to get into some questions. Then we're going to do audience questions. And then we're all going to hang out afterwards. So if you didn't get your question answered, if for some reason you were too shy to submit a question from your phone to show up on a tablet where we don't even know who it came from, we'll be there for you. It's OK. We can handle that. All right? So without further ado, I want to introduce you. You want to take over? I've got your slides ready to go. This is Dr. Yue Fei. He's co-founder and CTO of uSens, and he is our featured startup. You, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to present in VLab. A little bit about myself. So I have been spent more than 10 years on human-computer interaction research, and also I have been working on VR and AR from the point of how to give user a better way of interacting with this virtual digital content, and how digital content can merge with the physical content. So that's the augmented reality. So these are something I have worked on in the past. So on the upper left corner, so this is a 3D operating system that can expand. That was about in 2003. The idea was to utilize the 3D hardwares on that day, the computers, to render 3D graphics, but to the benefit not for gaming, but for transform the OS into a 3D OS. And the second thing on the bottom was I was thinking about how to make this big, large cave-like VR environment into a low-cost and also easy-to-use VR environment. We used sensors to sense human body movement, then use machine learning to learn user behavior, what user's intention, so that the 3D scene will follow user movement. User can reach stuff, operate stuff in the 3D environment. So the next was something I want to say is VR and AR today. This is not the form that our final destination. This is something just initial step, because in VR and AR, we cannot walk freely or interact with things freely using bare hand. We need to use controllers, and we have a wire attached. Those are the core problems, and that's why we founded the uSens in 2014. And for solving those core problems in the industry, we want to push the frontier of VR and AR. So there are 3 types of interaction for hand interaction. One is gesture communication. That is, we do a gesture and communicate the idea to another person that's far away. The second type of interaction is direct manipulation, which means we can interact with objects of any shape, random objects, any size, any shape. If you try to remember in the past 10 minutes what you do, probably you did a lot of direct manipulation of cups, controllers, chairs, your own clothes. And the third type is interaction via a tool, using the tool to achieve our goals. So if you look at all these 3 types of interaction, the handheld controller is only good for the last one. Right? The first one, once we open the hand, the controller will fail. And the second one, the controller cannot change its shape to fit our hand shape. Right? So that's why we go to the approach of using computer vision to do hand tracking. So if we classify all the controllers in this diagram, gamepad we most use is in this least natural, it's not very easy to carry, but it's okay. Not the worst thing, but from the naturalness, this is the least natural controller we can ever imagine. And there are also other controllers, like 6-off controllers, like the Vive controller. It is harder to carry, it's so big. And it doesn't really able to sense all the finger motions, only the 6-off wrist motion at most. And there's data gloves. That is better in this perspective, can sense all the finger motions, but it's very hard to carry around. And it's kind of, from today's spec, it's a little slow and inaccurate. So we want to do something that's much better, that's very easy to carry, you don't need to carry anything, and it can sense all the hand detailed nuances. So this is a demo running on mobile device. It is like an X-ray, can see all of our hand bones. And why it works is because computer vision, we first capture image on the upper left, then we use deep learning technology to find out where are the bones and what users are doing. So this needs a lot of data and a lot of training, but this is much smarter than us. Our human brain cannot compute at this fast, this speed, or this accuracy. So what can we do using this technology? So we can interact naturally with physical objects, just like in real world. Because for VR, our goal is to create the real world. and let people interact as if we are in the real world. No barriers, very immersive. That's why we need this technology. And in addition, we also create mixed reality technology that we can transform a VR headset into an augmented reality headset. And actually, there are 4 corners in mixed reality. That is reality, pure reality, augmented reality, augmented virtuality. That means mostly virtual, but we have a little bit of reality in the virtual environment, and a pure virtual reality. So our technology can do all the 4 corners of this mixed reality chart. Yep, thank you. That's all.
So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into some questions. We have a format we like to follow with the VLab. The first part of that is that opportunity I talked about. And so I'm going to kick this off to everybody. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with Bilal down on the end and just work our way this way. Kind of give me your very elevator pitch, kind of concise. What do you think the consumer adoption for AR or VR or both will look like over the next 5 years? It's been 5 years since we've been here and done this event. What does it look like in the next 5 years?
We might see adoption in certain circles. We certainly will see it for entertainment. We might see it in some work environments for industrial uses. But certainly, just for everyday use, I think we will still have the climbing of the ramp to do. However, I think if we start thinking of what people are actually doing with AR, VR, is actually bringing it into our everyday lives. I mean, Pokemon Go is a silly example, but it's an example of entrepreneurs realizing that people want to be in the real world, but they want to at the same time be transported into a reality that cannot be created. It's not just going to a new area, a new region, new geography, but creating a reality that may not be there. Think about people who cannot see wanting to feel that they can see as they're moving through a physical environment, or people who may not have hands who want to have that feeling. Now, I'm giving you examples where I know of companies that are working in that space that it's taking AR, VR a little bit further than what it has come to be defined in our world today. It has become too much of, can you build a game and it's a shooting game, or it's or you can do something very, I would call it rather traditional now to people sitting in this audience. We've seen hundreds of companies do that kind of stuff. We've seen Googles and Facebooks of the world do that kind of stuff. I think people are taking it further, and that's where I believe in 5 years we will see some amazing things happen we'll be surprised by.
Eric?
Well, first, thanks for having me, Hurley. I must be doing something right if I'm being interviewed by someone that goes by one name. So, it's great to be up here. It's all about timing, isn't it? And I was watching the event from 5 years ago, Terminator Vision, where you asked the audience, what are you waiting for? Let's do this. Like, what's the holdup? And I think that's a lot of what we'll talk about today as well. But the great thing about technology is it's so unpredictable. And so, if I could predict exactly where we'd be in 5 years, I'd be very rich, and I probably wouldn't be here on stage. I think the question that I'd turn around, actually, and one of my themes for tonight is I really want to talk about what we can all do today, right now, as opposed to 5 years from now, to make that vision happen 5 years from now. And so that's something I look forward to talking more about. I'm in a unique position where I get to talk to a lot of people and I get to ask for money and time to spend on augmented reality today. And that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. And so we're seeing a lot of people pull out the wallet and spend money where they weren't 5 years ago. But I think there's things that we can all do, and there's investments we can all make with our time or capital that can make AR happen, so that in 5 years when we're back here on stage, we're in a different place.
All right. Ebbe?
All right. 5 years is a long time. But still, it's going to come at us pretty fast. I come from a situation where we sort of have the luxury of being able to see for over a decade what people want to do, when they can create whatever they want in a virtual environment with Second Life. And the use cases are extremely broad. It's almost as complex as the things we do in the physical world we inhabit. From health to education to role-playing to teaching, learning, training, all of pretty much everything we do every day is, as human beings, is create spaces, come together in these spaces, have social interaction with that space and sometimes with the space itself. And then we move on to the next space that someone made to sort of repeat. And whether that's from the classroom to the meeting room to the playground to the bowling alley to the pub to whatever, it's what we do. But there's a huge amount of constraints in the physical space. Time and distance and money and safety and all kinds of things that you can completely eliminate in the virtual space. So it's amazing what people will do once they're empowered to create and share and socialize and interact with each other in virtual environments. And we'll see stuff in 5 years that we just couldn't even think of right now. So I'm just fascinated by it and look forward to empower people to be able to do as much of it as possible and see where it leads.
Thanks. Alberto?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. First of all, I'm Alberto Torres. I'm the CEO of Atheer, make augmented reality glasses. I saw a bunch of you trying them, which makes me happy. Okay, 5 years. I think the first thing is to separate AR and VR. I mean, it drives me a little crazy that I go to these events on AR, VR, and of course, these two things they have some correlation, but they're so different, and particularly they will be so different over the next 5 years that it gets completely confusing to think about them together. So, I mean, if I look at VR, VR is already available now in some capacity. You have Google Cardboard and all kinds of experiences. I mean, they're not perfect experiences, but they are ways for people to begin to adopt those experiences. And it's very clear to me that 5 years from now, consumers are going to be more and more familiar with these VR experiences. I mean, to me, the real question is, how relevant it's going to be for our lives. Is it like right now where it's a relatively, cool experience to have for a little bit, or is it something that is becoming more integral to how we do or how we entertain ourselves or we do a task, whatever? I'm not sure. I actually think I'm guessing 5 years may still be too short to have that deep interaction. On the AR side, I think bearing some kind of magic leap of faith, there is I just don't see how we're going to have AR broadly in the consumer space. I think you look at I really think for the next 5 years, AR is going to be primarily an enterprise play, a play where there will be specific applications that people are pursuing. And by the way, they may not look anything like the VR experiences. They may not be 3D. They may not be, there might be things that are pretty simplistic. But for example, I mean, a mechanic fixing a plane. If one of our airline customers, they lose $50,000 when a plane is grounded for an hour. So those guys are willing to use anything to reduce that amount. And I think in 5 years, there will be plenty of deployments on enterprise. There might be a few things for some sports or some particular segments of consumer, but I don't think we're going to have consumer deployment of AR in that time frame. Not in a major way. You?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. As you said, right now there are some deployment of VR headsets, but the graphical quality is not good enough to touch all the consumers yet. So I think in the next 5 years, it will become better. Will be better rendering, better optics, make it more immersive. So every consumer will love it. And the VR, I guess, will be lighter, easier to use, maybe cheaper. And in another side to see it is the content side. So I think, I hope, and I really think in the next 5 years, we will see real major hit applications really unlock the creativity, really meaningful for our economics and society, those kind of applications. Because if we look back, virtual reality is not a new thing. In a broader definition, virtual reality means virtualizing the real world. That's what we do since the beginning of human history, from the painting in the caves to the Renaissance paintings. That's for virtualizing the reality. And now we have, every time we invent a technology to better virtualize the reality, we will see a huge economic growth. For example, the GUI unlocked the virtualized office, make office virtual. Internet make email virtual, make publication virtual, also make our relationship virtual online. So I think VR and AR headset is just a new tool to even further push our society in that direction.
So I want to bring it back to Eric. You know, Eric, you made a good point. Said a lot of people are coming to you, and Bilal the same. They're asking for checks. They're looking for stuff. We want to bring it back from 5 years to kind of right now. What do you look for? Where do you think the opportunities are, both from the investor side and then also from the entrepreneurial side? Because they may not be the same, right? Depending on time frames and funds and opportunities. Eric, let's start with you, and then we'll go to you, Bilal.
Yeah, so maybe what I'll do is bring it back to how we see AR evolving, and then as we go through, there are some specific things I'd like to highlight as far as where there's some investment opportunities, where there's some entrepreneurial opportunities. I guess keying in off of what Alberto said, so I spent some time at a company previous or in between slots at Google, and I was a partner with Alberto and team, and so totally understand that enterprise space and the opportunities there, and focusing on very key use cases. I think what we're focused on at Google generally with technology is making it available to large numbers of people, right? That's one of our missions, is making information and technology available to millions, hundreds of millions, billions of people. And I think what's happened with AR as far as consumer adoption is we've skipped some steps. And so a lot of people wonder, and it's in all seriousness, I'll go back and answer your question in a bit more detail as well as far as where we'll be in 5 years. So I think what's happened is we've missed some fundamental building blocks with augmented reality for consumers, and that's caused us to kind of hiccup, right? Like you could almost, well, I was going to use a Tesla analogy with self-driving cars, but I'll start with, so the first building block, and if I can, I'll draw 4 quadrants. So imagine in your mind on the y-axis, you've got room scale augmented reality scenarios, and then on the top you have world scale augmented reality scenarios. So it's a scale on the y-axis. On the x-axis, you have form factor. So I'll just start with phones, and then I'll go to, over time, I think we all agree we're going to head down the path, or we're at least where we want to go is the panacea is your always-on head-mounted device that consumers have. You know, maybe Hurley's got his on now. And so the sequencing that we see there, and the reason, and you'll see as I paint this is some of the blocks we've been missing. So you start with the room-based augmented reality experiences with a form factor, a phone form factor that's fully empowered to create real, true AR. So if anybody tried the demos that my friend Lorenzo was doing at the first table there coming in the door, that's our phone that's coming out in a few weeks, and we see that as being true augmented reality, where you actually know where you are in space and you know what's around you. And the reason we need that first is because that unleashes then people to go and build content and apps and experiences that also allows people to understand the capabilities of true augmented reality. Next, then, we go to world scale phone-based augmented reality. And what you need there is you need the map of the world, essentially. Now you're fixing those augmented reality scenarios in real places in the world. And so when you look at Pokemon Go, and I'm glad I wasn't the first one to bring it up, they jumped to that second step, but it didn't fully, and you know, we understand why they did it, but they didn't fully create the fully augmented reality experience in the first step. And so we've missed that. And so we need to back up and we need to get that right before we go to those world scale scenarios. Then you come down in step 3 and you go to room scale with head-mounted devices. Now that you've got the map of the world, you've got the room scale content and the experiences, you teach people about augmented reality. You know, it's not such a big deal for consumers to put head-mounted devices on. Admittedly, we need a bit more time before we get those devices smaller so people can wear those devices around. But we think it'll start in the home and office, so not that far off from what Alberto's talking about, home and office productivity. So but room scale. And then eventually you get to the world scale with always-on head-mounted devices where you've got a map of the world, you've got content and experiences, and you've got a technology where Moore's law has gotten to some point where we're small and fast and cheap to where you feel like you can wear something on your face. So that's kind of how we see evolving over time.
All right.
Sorry, that was a long-winded answer there. I might have used up a few of my slots on that one.
Look, we at Lux Capital, we believe in technology changing world in a way that you can solve practical problems. And I think that's been the fundamental problem in hundreds of AR, VR startups that we may have seen over the last many years, is that many of them were not solving real problems. And I think we're looking for that. I don't know if there's like a one single, killer application. Like, I think we heard industrial applications may be an interesting one. You're a mechanic, you have a phone up and descriptions, or you have somebody, giving you descriptions, you're seeing a lot of information, maybe that's a good one. If you look back in time, today we've gotten used to, we want the perfect device, we want the Apple device, it has to look beautiful, high resolution, amazing 3D surround sound and all that stuff. The reality is we adopted technology when it was really early. The early computers did not do very much, but they did word processing for us or simple math and simple spreadsheets for us. That was it. That was good enough. And our first phones just had one thing they did. It was make a call, and it was so big that I couldn't sit like this. I would be sitting like this, right? But they did that one thing well, and they solved a particular problem for us. So much so that my first experience with a computer, having grown up outside this country, was actually at an internet cafe. There was no internet. It was a computer store. It was a computer shop you went to so that you could go and type up your application and make deletions and insertions easily instead of a typewriter to get your college essay done. And that's what I use. And we're seeing that happen now. And if you look at our investments, if you look at what other people are investing, yes, there are some core investments being done on the semiconductor side or the core fundamental technologies that are needed. But a lot of the applications a lot of investments are happening where you're solving real practical problems. Where we have companies that might be scanning 3D spaces because the application they're solving is selling real estate without having to go there. There might be an application for conferences. So all these people, these hundreds of people, don't have to travel from around the Bay Area in a single room just to have some sandwiches outside and sit in a room. We could be doing this more regularly.
I enjoyed having sandwiches.
Well, great. I'm glad. I am glad we could have delivered them to you to your home using DoorDash or something. But I think we will find specific applications. We're trying to expect too much out of single devices. We're trying to expect them to become the iPhone without being those early Motorola devices that were used for phone or SMS.
So, Alberto, let me ask you a question. You've done quite a bit of this. From an entrepreneurial side, what are the risks you see in starting up a new venture in either of those spaces?
I mean, I think the risks are probably twofold. I mean, one is we're obviously in an early stage, so you have to find the right early adopters, and you have to find the backers that are going to stay with you over the long haul to make it happen. I think in this particular industry, this particular area of AR VR, the confusion is just so extreme, and the hype is so extreme that is really that adds an additional layer to this. You go and talk to people, and you go and pitch my company, and people will ask you, I mean, how are you going to be able to compete with Facebook? Well, I don't compete with Facebook. There's absolutely nothing that I do. I mean, maybe eventually over the time, but there's nothing that Facebook is doing that is even remotely competitive with what I do. But people are thinking, I have Oculus, so it's VR, it's a completely different thing. And I mean, and it's kind of amazing the level of sort of confusion and hype. I mean, thankfully, for at least what we try to do is to focus on our customers and understand how they're looking at their journey and what's important for them, and how do we build the original Motorola phone as opposed to the iPhone 7. You're not going to build the iPhone 7 the first generation. It's going to be something. I actually had a slide for an introduction to this where I talk about the next generation of computing, and I have exactly the first PCs, the first phone. It's exactly that's exactly the case. That's where we are. And now people forget that Motorola and Nokia and all these places started with these big things, and so was Apple and Microsoft and a lot of others, and they sold a few. They sold like 1,000 units in the first year and so forth. But they built tremendous things that have completely changed our lives. So I think that's exactly what's going to happen here as well.
So Abe, going to you, Linden Lab has done quite a bit over quite a bit of time. Did you ever fall victim to the confusion or the hype, so to speak, that Alberto spoke of as kind of from a risk factor?
Well, I mean, it is messy, but I would say it's basically, because it's early, it's high risk, but also high reward. So if you play it right, it could be extremely lucrative. But there will also be a lot of people that will sort of miss the mark on this trip we're going down. I think one has to sort of take a deep breath and just realize that it's not going to change by tomorrow. It's going to take years. And you need to build a strategy and make sure you have the funding to last for a while to get you through some bumpy roads. There's going to be platforms or hardware or whatever systems that look like the right ones, but then they're not, and it's another one. And so you have to make sure that you sort of choose your battles and what to focus on. There's so many problems to solve, though, that there's we don't have enough time today to even try and tackle just a small portion of them. And so choosing what not to do becomes really important, and try and sort of nail what's mentioned here, like nail a core use case. And that could be a very broad or very narrow, but it needs to be focused. Well, Second Life is kind of an interesting precursor to some of what we can expect to see in the future. So we have, thanks to Second Life, we have a tremendous amount of information about what people want to do and what they do. Second Life has now been around for 13 years. All the content in Second Life, all the experiences are created by users. So we're in the platform business, not in the content business. And I mean, last year alone, even though Second Life has now slowly declined for 8 years or so, it's been slowly declining, but even last year, creators of content and experiences in last year cashed out $60 million. So a lot of people make their living in the virtual world, creating content and businesses, whether you're a musician or an educator or a content creator. So there's definitely room for a huge amount of, like in the sort of the future digital economy when it comes to virtual anything. And so, but Second Life also had a lot of shortcomings. It's a bit messy, it's complicated, it's difficult to understand, it's hard to get into it. A lot of people go in and think it's a game, but it's not a game. Just like the real world, you got to walk out in the street and choose where to go and what to do. There's nothing that says click this button, shoot this thing. Like, no, you have to make decisions, and that can be confusing to people in the virtual world. But we also see just so incredible sort of use cases that works like incredible. Texas A&M teaching chemistry in Second Life, and the virtual students outperforming the traditional lab students because they can better understand the information, the content, and people being treated for post-traumatic stress disorder, people who have physical disabilities that cannot move around in the physical space, go dancing and have social lives. So it's just incredibly empowering for so many reasons. And like I said earlier, VR will take it to another level because you're not just looking at it, you're inside of it with other people, and you can get this complete sense of understanding other people, this sort of empathy, reacting to other people and to other situations, and understand things that otherwise would be impossible. So we're drawing on some of that experience to go build the next thing, Sansar. We've been at it for about 3 years, but we're basically trying to empower all of us to ultimately be able to create and own our own virtual experiences that we can share with whomever we want. So we're not necessarily beholden to just being inside the game or inside the experience that someone else created, just like we really like having our own homes with our own style and our own flavors and our own music and our own rugs and our own everything, even though we didn't build or create any of it because we just assembled things. Well, we want to make it easy for all of you ultimately. We see a future where all of us are going to own multiple virtual experiences for various purposes, just like we have physical experiences that we own or share with other people. And we can choose who has access to those and how we interact with each other and what purpose we have in there, whether it's to teach, learn, heal, train, play, whatever it might be. So
that's very cool. Yeah. You know, let me start with you on the next question. So everyone has kind of said, you know, there's a hiccup. There's things we could do closer to now than rather in the future. But looking at your work, looking at the presentation you gave, you have I think you spend most of your time in the future, right? With the different interfaces and how you think those will be. You know, if you went out, say 2025, right? What do you think your product, some of these other products, what do you think they look like? How do you think they interact at that point?
Sure. From my understanding or my belief, the advancement of technology is to making the digital world more realistic, more natural, and more interactable as the real world. So that's basically the history of our technology. So yeah, we think in the future, next 10 years, we're still on this path. The reason is to make people more immersed, easier to understand the digital content, and extend our ability to interact with the digital content. So the technology will finally help us to become Superman, because in 2 ways. One way is that help us to better understanding the physical world, help us to see better. AR certainly is a technology, help us to see better. And on the other hand is help us communicate better with other humans, collaborate together, also make us more intelligent, making better decisions. So how will the technology transform? I think the today's VR and AR is just one step in this trajectory. It's just one milestone. The glass type AR and the VR, maybe after 10 years, this will obsolete. What will be better is direct neuron binding, maybe DNA modification, but the path is making us stronger.
Awesome. Well, let's move into some of the more, some people may consider them a little bit more controversy. We've got definitely some different opinions on the panel. But right now it seems, at least to I think the casual observer, both of these technologies are very focused on entertainment, right? What are the needs outside of entertainment that you think will be most impactful on society as a whole? I mean, you know, I know, you know, Ebbe, you talked about, you know, curing things, PTSD, things like that. There's a variety of things, but, you know, let's go ahead and bring it back to Eric. Eric, what do you think is going to be the next kind of big boon? Right now, if you think AR, VR, you think games, you think Pokemon Go and PlayStation and things like that. What's going to be the next big area that you think are actually going to have a societal impact?
Yeah, so certainly games help us learn about the technology, and most of us like to play games. There's certainly going to be a social aspect to a lot of this technology, and I think, you know, we'll see those. You could think of those as vertical slices, or you could think of those as being integrated into some of these other experiences. So something that we all do every day is shop. And so if you go back maybe 15 years, back to late 90s, early 2000s, you know, when the first internet boom, the assumption was that all shopping was going to move to the internet, right? We were all going to be spending all our time shopping online. And then, so we went through that process and we digitized 2D images of all our products. And then phones came along and we went through the mobile commerce. And now what's interesting, and shopping is a microcosm of what's happening more broadly with augmented reality, is we're almost coming full circle, because what's happening is we've leveled out at about just above 10% in terms of total spending, total shopping dollars. About 10% of total shopping dollars worldwide are spent online. And what we've realized is that people still spend most of their money in a physical environment, either indoors, physically, in person. And what's happening with augmented reality is we're coming all the way around full circle to where augmented reality can have a huge impact on shopping in that physical space. Because when you shop in that physical space, you need to understand the space you're in, the environment you're in. You know, I'm sitting on a stage here looking out at an audience, or maybe I'm in a bazaar in India, or maybe I'm at a mall down in Cupertino. But I need to understand that space in order to have a true augmented reality experience. The other thing that's happening is there's kind of a perfect storm of demand from the shopping industry in that, for example, in the US, retailers are overstored. So they built too much real estate in stores. And so what's happening now is they're needing to make better utilization of that space in the form of driving up revenue per square foot, having smaller spaces, but still needing to be able to show all their products. And so they use augmented reality to do that. You see, for example, car dealers like Audi's got Audi City in London. People are buying cars without even test driving the real car because they can see it in augmented reality. Lowe's Home Improvement's doing a ton of work in their stores with augmented reality. And then outside the store, I want to be able to shop in my physical space. So maybe I'm not actually in the store, but I still want to be able to have a physical shopping experience at the place that I want to have that experience. And so, you know, a real simple example is being able to see a couch fit in my living room. Does it fit? Does it look right? Can I walk around it? How does it look? I want to show my friends. I want to look at different colors and different versions of that couch. And
So let me ask you a question. With that, you know, in mind,
yeah,
is, you know, what's Google doing in that AR space? Is it gonna be another AR headset or anything like that?
Well, on the AR headset question, you know, I kind of I'd go back to my earlier answer, really around. I think we're all thinking about AR headsets, but we need to see going through that right sequence to get to that point. So we're starting with phones. And down the road, I think there will be great shopping experiences. You see some of those shopping experiences actually happening on some of the early AR headsets that are out there in the market today. But we really want to get something ubiquitous out there that will allow people to, you know, do the thing that almost everybody does every day, which is shop, and learn about augmented reality along the way. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bilal.
Let me mention something here. So I think there's some examples that all of us would agree on because we've all been on many panels and we've heard similar examples again and again. You know, you can do shopping. You know, we have a company called Matterport where really people are buying multi-million-dollar homes without ever visiting the home. They just go around and you can see as much time, not the 15-minute huddle you got to go through and see the house and put in the offer. Take your time, spend your time. You know, we have companies that are doing social VR. You're interacting with them. There are lectures going on. As you said, you know, there's classes taking place and conferences and, you know, meetings, so you don't have to get on those damn video calls anymore. So all that is true. And I think all of those, to me, point in one simple direction, which is if you look at the history of certainly consumer internet, right, and this is an extension of consumer internet, companies that have succeeded have generally taken something we do in our lives that we really care about, or at least a small population really care about a lot, and some others participate, and hyper it, right? So whether it's Facebook, where all of us have friends, or Twitter, we all like podiums, or whatever. I think the reality that I do want to point out, and it'd be good to hear other people's take on it, I believe we are where perhaps iPhone was when it first came out in 2007 timeframe. When it first came out, everybody thought, all the pundits in the room, and I'm sure all the people sitting around Apple probably thought something similar, that, oh, the best applications on it are going to be sort of, you know, doing your email better or faster or surfing the internet. In fact, I bought the iPhone because you could do this pinch thing on the internet, which was such a pain on a BlackBerry. And it would be, you know, where's that little pencil I could use to do my spreadsheets better, right? Because that's what we were all doing. And we all thought we were going to build those. Reality is, not even Steve Jobs could have predicted at that time that the biggest company built on top of the iPhones or the mobile phones is going to be an app to call cabs, okay? And, you know, none of you would have predicted that, right? Like cabs? And that's a $60, $70 billion company today. Or the second biggest company is going to be for photos that disappear.
But that's an interesting point. You know, you
So,
say
so
that.
I just want to make sure that we understand all the applications we're going to tell you today are really kind of like old, boring people trying to tell you what we think people will do. We really don't have a clue because there's probably a 16-year-old somewhere who's creating the next Pokemon Go, which will become the next $20 billion company, and we're all going to come back and say, that worked. I'm glad Intel developed the processors for it, Atheer developed the headsets for it, and so on.
Let's go back. You know, you said nobody would know that there was going to be an app they called a cab. We do have drone deliveries. We do have all of these services that bring everything to us. So from the entrepreneurs, and Abe, let's start with you. What is the role of AR, VR in a world where you want to talk about shopping and this commerce when everything's delivered to you anyway, right? You could, maybe the drone brings it to you, you see it physically if you like it or not, you put it back in and it flies it away. I mean, you have a lot of experience in the virtual world in that. What do you think about the effects of things like that, like he said, on this commerce opportunity?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about the drones, but I agree that we can't pretend to know what's going to happen, or even things that we thought were all done and settled, whether it was who was winning email, who was winning messaging. And then another one comes out, which is just a slight nuanced variation. It's not even a different thing. It's just like, it's got a tweak.
Slack.
You know? Or even just like, you know, went from MSN and AOL messengers to now it's, now it's WhatsApp and, you know, Facebook Messenger. Like, and what's the difference? Like, you can barely tell. But it just completely eliminated the previous guys, and now there's new guys. So there will be like iterations where you think you got it right, and then someone else comes out and just has a slight nuanced tweak to it and just makes it better, or enough differentiation or whatever it is to just completely take over. And then there will be solutions coming on top of what we're talking about today that we can't even begin to comprehend that it's going to happen.
So I'm curious there because I hear, compared to 5 years ago, there's a lot of vision. I hear a lot of, we don't know and everything, but I can't imagine that you guys invest in we don't know. Or like, if I came to you with a pitch and I said, lots of amazing, wonderful things are going to happen, you should give me a lot of money, right? That probably doesn't.
Magic Leap is raising money on that, right? Oculus was that. I mean, and they have had generated, one of them generated returns. It is real. I'm not saying that there are no applications that will create money that we're talking about today.
Oh, I guess where I'm going is a different area, which is where is the vision, right? The vision can't just be like, a lot of amazing stuff will happen. Alberto, I mean, in AR, you spend a lot of time focused on this. What's your long-term vision for AR?
Yeah, so let me start by saying that when people talk about AR, they tend to think about two different visions. I'll go back to answer your question. Some people are coming from the VR side. And they think about AR as like VR, but you mix up with people. So you have, with the real world. So I'm seeing you, and I have some aliens running around the crowd as well, and whatever. So that's kind of one vision. The other one, actually, which I subscribe to, comes more from this device. Actually, the reason both the founder of Atheer started these and the reason I joined Atheer is because we were both looking at the limitations of mobile phones. And mobile phones are the most amazing technology that probably the world has ever seen. It's incredible, the level of penetration around the world, the level of connectivity that has introduced. I mean, it's unbelievable from us wasting time in Pokemon Go to literally people saving lives in places like Africa where they couldn't find a doctor before. I mean, really unbelievable transformation. And I think what the amazing thing about this is a computer that is with you and is very contextual, but it also has some limitations. The limitation of this is that it has a problem, which is it's always too small when you're using it. At least particularly at my age, I can't read anything on this thing anymore. I bought the new device for the iPhone 7 Plus, but they haven't sent it to me yet. But anyhow, the other problem is the devices are too big when they're not in use. You don't want to carry a brick. You don't want to carry something large. So the promise of the kind of AR that we were looking at is the ability to create through glasses and other forms to create very large images that you can interact with in the real world that are extremely contextual. This is very, very contextual. It's with you all the time. But it's even more contextual if I know exactly what I'm looking at and exactly where I'm going. So my vision of, to now answer your question, my vision is...
Thank you.
So my vision is really that you're going to get to a point where whether you wear them all the time or you wear them for specific situations, you're going to be able to have this incredibly contextual, incredibly smart perspective on the world. So you're going around, and I know probably who every one of you are, if you like. If I walk into a place, I may know where the where are the directions to the restroom nearby, or if I have at every point in time it's going to be very contextual. And I think, frankly, it's going to be a combination of existing applications, because I mean the iPhone started because people could make phone calls, because you could do iTunes. Those are really the key things.
I remember when we wanted to do apps, talked about apps, and we were going to do apps with Apple, and they said there'll be no apps.
There was no apps, exactly. People forget about that. But of course, when you open an app, you create all kinds of stuff that we don't know yet, and I think it's going to be the same here. There has to be a bridge of bringing content that already exists that people are accustomed to, but also the openness to the new thing.
So, Bilal, you mentioned Magic Leap, right? I mean, I'll ask the two investors, and we'll come down to the audience. It's very interesting, right? Are they the Theranos of augmented reality?
I hope not. No. I mean,
well, think about it from this way. I say that half jokingly, but you have industries. I first worked with augmented reality and virtual reality at Apple in 1993, so I've heard a lot of this for a long time. And there's been several kind of pinnacle events where it's overhyped, or the confusion that several of you have talked about. And it's, I don't want to say victimize the entrepreneurs or the investors, but in a way, you can get caught up in that. And when those promises aren't delivered, or, as Eric put, 5 years away, there's a lot of things to do in between. When you're not focused on those near-term visions, right, and executing on wins, and you're focused so far out, do you run a risk of taking others around you down, right? There's a potential argument that
I don't worry about that.
That would happen.
So I don't worry about that, and it's not because that there's some scientific problem that does the science work or not. I think we have to understand if Magic Leap was not, and I only know this much about what Magic Leap is actually doing or capable of doing, maybe a little bit more than an average person, but certainly not everything. I would say, if Magic Leap was not doing what it needs to do, who would do that, right? Like, is there an organization we can point to today? Is it SRI that would do that? I mean, is there a Bell Labs today that would do that? Is Intel or Qualcomm going to do that? No. It has to be done somewhere, and I think we're fortunate that there are organizations like Google or Facebook and others that are available that happen to have cash cows elsewhere, that happen to have founders that think of the world, what it would look like 20 years out, because like in previous years, generations ago, when people gave money to the MITs and Stanfords and Harvards, they were thinking, what would the world look like 50 years out? What problems do I need to solve? Well, today, Facebooks and Googles are doing that. So I think they will get there. And if they fail, it's not because, this was hype or not. It's simply because, look, technology, this is hard stuff to do.
Fair enough. Different question for you and Eric. Again, are you investing 50 years out? The reason I ask is, and that's a fine approach, but the reason I ask is, as an entrepreneur, I get concerned about things that are so hyped with so little data, not just Magic Leap, but there's many things where it's touted as some new technology, some of the interface technologies that are currently in market. 5 years ago, they were going to blow everything away, and they got all the funding. Some of them sold, some of them didn't, but none of them have actually really produced any actual impact on consumer adoption or even revenues or so on and so forth. So I'm just wondering, how long are you guys going to stick with it? And then how does it affect these guys? I know Linden Labs, Atheer, I'm not sure about your case. You guys have been doing this for a while, right? So you've seen this kind of ebb and tide of these things. Abe, how do you think things that are overhyped affect you? And quickly, because we're going to move to audience questions in a moment.
Well, I mean, some of the overhype is not necessarily bad because it creates investments, and which means that things are being pushed forward faster. You know, whether that Magic Leap or whomever it is actually succeed, whatever, to me, because I'm not an investor, but they hopefully do something that gets us further along faster than if that investment hadn't been made. And maybe that investment hadn't been made if they didn't create a bunch of hype around it. I don't know. So I think it's okay because it accelerates what's ultimately, in my opinion, inevitable.
Alberto.
And I'd rather get there sooner rather than later. So it's all good to me.
Alberto, do you see it as an accelerant, or do you see it as a risk for you as you're out, you know, raising money or continuing to grow a company?
It's both. I mean, if I answer your first question about Magic Leap, it's obviously, you know, we'll have to see. They're solving some fundamental problems. So if they actually truly deliver a solution on some of the things that they do, maybe they're worth the money that they got investment. They have, I mean, I don't have a clue of where exactly they are in that development, and it feels pretty aggressive what might be done in the short term. But it is a pretty amazing problem they're trying to solve. And I think when you have those kinds of issues, yes, it attracts investment, but it also creates, you know, these distortions where people say, okay, how do you compete again with somebody that raised $2 billion?
Yep.
And so it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I mean, I think it's sometimes people get too excited, and then also you get into drops of disillusion, or even just decide that, hey, this is over, because
it's probably pretty fair way to
as
look
an
at
investor, can I say something? It is, you know, it is easier to take bets to compete with companies like Magic Leap, which are on a 10-year or 20-year horizon, than it is to take bets with a consumer internet startup, right? Where you might have 10 companies that get created overnight, right? Because at least there's nothing Magic Leap can do overnight to kill you. Like Google can't just stop promoting you, right? Facebook can't just make everything available for free and open and, you know, give out Oculus headsets for free. There's real technology development to be done, and I think the scientists they have are amazing, but Atheer has great scientists, and a bunch of other companies have great people that they can solve those problems in more creative, more interesting ways, which is why I think you're seeing today, I mean, another example that's in front of us is autonomous cars, for example. It's a very hard problem. And, you know, we've invested in it, and, you know, yeah, it's 5, 10, maybe 20 years away. If nothing else, regulatory-wise, we have big uncertainty. But multiple groups are attacking it because it's not necessary for there to be one single winner.
Right.
And yes, there's a moment in time, if you take a snapshot, like, you know, 1 month after Magic Leap's financing comes out, and then you ask for financing, yes, people are a little bit concerned and worried, but over time, that's really not the case.
I guess only time will tell. We are going into audience questions with you. We have a question specifically for you.
Okay.
And the question is, uSens tech, how much different is it than, say, a Leap Motion?
Yeah, there are some research of hand tracking, for example, by Microsoft, by academic, also a company like Leap Motion. So we have compared to academic work. So our performance is much higher, which means we use very little CPU if we want to achieve the same frame rate. For Leap Motion, their method is not public, so we don't know what kind of machine learning algorithm they have used. But from the benchmark on the same hardware, we see also our algorithm has lower CPU consumption.
Okay, now this question is a very interesting one, because it involves both Google and Atheer. So I'm going to go to Alberto first, but then Eric, I want to give you a chance to comment as well. It says, to the passive observer, it looked like Google Glass, even for enterprise, failed. What is Atheer doing differently?
Well, a lot of different things. I mean, first of all,
It's a really rough question.
Yeah,
All
no,
I heard
I mean,
was like one gasp.
So let me highlight a few things. I mean, number one, I think Google Glass, in a way, I don't necessarily see it as a failure. I mean, it failed as maybe its original mission, which is to create this device that everybody would wear today. I mean, they went for like the most demanding use case in consumer as day one, but I think it did actually open up a lot of minds of enterprises and a lot of places. I mean, almost every customer I have is someone that at some point tried Google Glass and said, well, this is not quite right, but I can see there's something here. So I think in that respect, to me, the biggest issue was the positioning as this is a something that's ready to go for consumers today. There's obviously other things. I mean, it's very, the display is very minimal, the interaction is very limited, you couldn't run full applications. So there's a number of things that were not quite ready, in my opinion. But it opened up the minds of a lot of people. I think it was a really important product.
Well, let me hear from Eric, because that's the audience question. They did call, they did mention Google. I want to give you a chance to respond. I was personally, an early adopter of Google Glass, and I found it very useful for some of the stuff I was doing. What do you think about response to that question from your perspective?
Can you repeat the question?
Question is, to the passive observer, it looked like Google Glass, even for enterprise, failed, and they were wondering what he's doing differently.
Oh, I see. Got it. So I was actually on the team, and it's interesting because when we talk about time horizons, Google X, so Glass is part of the Google X team, which is taking a 10 to 20 year time horizon. It's a special group within Google that's taking those longer term bets. And it was one of those bigger bets. So it was one of those, let's put a lot of investment and let's see if we can really push the industry forward. Actually, side note as well is that Google is still investing in aspects of Google Glass, and the Glass at Work program is still around. You can search for it and find it. And it actually, I think it pushed a lot of the industry forward to Alberto's.
So it's probably unfair to call it a failure. It's not done yet.
That's right. I think
it's a more long-term vision.
That's right. And I think in hindsight, even to what it's done today, there's been a lot of success, both in the form of learnings, which is often the biggest success for everybody, both internally at Google and just generally in the market. It pushed the industry forward. It got people thinking about, as Oculus did for VR.
Right. Someone has to be the first to take the risk, right?
That's right.
So next audience question, Abe, this is coming your way. Will VR make a big dent in business travel? Do you think that virtual reality will ever impact, the airline stock prices or things, because people aren't traveling, they're just having these virtual meetings and things of that nature? What's your opinion on that?
Over time, it could. I'm not sure if we might travel for just as much, but for a different reason. But there's certainly a lot of types of social communication, interaction situations that can be completely replaced through VR and AR over time. So, and just like we have better tools today, and it's easier today to work as a non-centralized organization where you can be distributed all over the place, and whether it's tools like Slack or whatever, VR and AR will certainly sort of add to that. We already have meetings in Sansar that there's no way I could do it on a phone. We have companies even that use Second Life for this, and they're not even in VR yet, that they said if Second Life didn't exist, they would not meet because they couldn't afford to, and you can't have 30 people meet and have a coherent conversation on the phone or video conference. So it is a medium that allows for much improved social interaction. There's no doubt about it. Now, so you might take the money you save from not traveling for these meetings and go on vacation instead. So I'm not sure if it'll impact the travel industry, but there's certainly a lot of reasons people travel today that they're not going to have to in the future.
So, and guys, I apologize. Apparently, this is the most popular guy on the panel because everybody's directed questions directly to him, whereas the rest of us, 0 questions. but
go, people.
This is for you as well. Somebody asked, how big is the market for uSens technologies?
Mm-hmm. For now, we are targeting 3 technologies. One is indoor position tracking that's needed for both VR and AR. Right now, on the market, we see doing pretty well in the indoor position tracking is HoloLens. It works pretty well. But we want to liberate this technology to other companies who want to make AR headsets and VR headsets. And the second technology is freehand interaction. We see this is a crucial part for AR devices. So that's the, say today, 2 key problems in AR and VR. One is indoor position tracking, one is hand tracking. And we also want to help the VR headset to make it more fun, more exciting by adding augmented reality, mixed reality to VR headset. So we don't have a number how large the market is, but we see that most of the VR, AR headset makers will like to have these technologies.
Okay, So for the next question, I want to hit a couple of you. And Bilal, I'm going to come back to you, but I want to start with Alberto. It says that these are highly engaging means of communication. So what impact will they have on people and how they access and comprehend information? For example, news, schools, and curriculum. Alberto, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I think you have to separate AR and VR. I think on the VR space, there is, I mean, it's incredibly, or it can be an incredibly visceral situation. So it could be, I mean, if you visit the Stanford VR lab, for example, they've done a lot of research about how people get affected by those experiences. And have a person using an axe to hack some trees down, and and then if you do that, you become much more of a conservationist and save paper than if you don't. And so there's a lot of treatment of phobias and all kinds of things that can be done that way. I think AR is different. Obviously, you still can do instructions. You can look at. I mean, if you're teaching a surgeon or a repairman how to do things, you might have overlays to the real world and other things. But I think, again, they're going to be quite different in terms of the applications.
And Bilal, you're talking about investing far out in the future. When you look out in the future, the way people comprehend information, whether it be curriculum or instructive material, what do you think? How do you think that's really going to impact people?
We see in our companies every day, and I'm not exaggerating because we are on the spectrum of VCs in Silicon Valley. We are the ones who do more crazy stuff. We see science fiction becoming reality regularly, right? So you can do surgery using robots, but we still have this issue of the good surgeon, bad surgeon. Now you can layer on additional layers of data to guide that surgeon, so you're no longer picking the best surgeon because all surgeons are basically about the same now, right? I mean, that is happening real time in our portfolio companies. You can have, as I mentioned, the way we understand physical dimensions is very constraining. It's we're in this room and that's it. We're in this lobby and that's it. And these are the number of people we can fit in. There's only this many people we could fit into this room. That changes dramatically, and I think people are starting to do that. The other thing to recognize, and again, I learned all of these things not because I sit and pontificate. Amazing, smart people like you guys come and tell me this, so I just regurgitate to you. If we are in, whether it's AR, VR, or phone, I don't give a damn what physical device you end up using to interact with this new environment that would get created, and how physical and how real it is not. If we're there all the time, we may not want to be who we are. We may not want our faces shown. We may not like who we look like. We may have deformities, but we may not want to show what those are. So how do you do that? And how do you know what is real and what is not? Like today, I can tell you that because I invest in these areas as well, it is impossible for an ordinary person or an ordinary technology company to figure out what Bin Laden video was really Bin Laden or computer generated. It's very hard to do that. So we will have to come up with technologies to figure out who are we really talking to? Is that really my mom on the line? Is that really my wife that I'm talking to in this room that I've showed up in? So I think there's tremendous amount of work that's happening on sort of bringing technologies together and making what would appear like science fiction real in everyday life.
So, Abe, there's a question actually came in for you. It says, how do companies engage with customers in immersive virtual environments like Sansar? And how is that different from the real world?
How do they
interact and engage with customers?
Well, it's becoming fairly similar. We're getting closer and closer to interacting with customers like in the virtual space like we would in the physical space. I see your head move, I see your eyes move, I see your mouth move, I see your hands move. So I'm here talking to you, and whether I'm made of atoms or pixels, like it's starting to not matter anymore. So it's really not that different. And as the ease of use of these technologies, and you can just naturally interact in virtually like you do in the physical world that we have learned over many years, then it's approaching that point where it becomes indistinguishable. And we're getting to the point in Sansar, and also, Alberto mentioned, the work at Stanford, so I highly recommend a lot of the research done by Jeremy Balinson over there. The human brain does not distinguish. So what you take away from a virtual situation with other human beings or an environment versus the physical world has the same impact. So you don't, and so I go home and I remember that funny time with these guys and I go, wait a minute, was that in the physical space or the virtual space? I can't, they blur. I can't even tell the difference, so because the brain doesn't tell the difference. And that's how close we are.
But by the way, there's a negative to that as well, right? I mean, so we have a portfolio company, Altspace, which has the same social VR, and they had to deal with the fact that people felt that they could harass people because you're not there, and you had to deal with it.
We played that game for a decade in Second
Correct.
Life, so we have a lot of experience with that. But yeah, you're touching on identity and trust and those kinds of things, and those kind of have to be layered on top of what we're doing, because just having anonymous people run around in rooms and that it's not a good situation.
So Eric, I want to come to you on this one. It's very long, so you have to bear with me. It's like a statement question for whoever wrote this.
I might need you to read it twice.
I'm talking about you. It says, you all talked about solving practical problems, but it seems like the best experiences for VR today come from gaming. Enterprise use cases have an especially tough time translating to this form factor. So what do you see as the biggest challenges to getting better experiences in VR for other use cases outside of gaming?
The biggest challenges for getting other use cases into VR. So first off, I appreciated Alberto's differentiation between AR and VR up front. I focus mainly on augmented reality.
Totally, and I know they said virtual reality, but
yeah, that's fine.
If you think about it, kind of AR has Pokemon Go and everything, so I do want you to approach it from the AR perspective.
Thank you. So what do I see as the biggest roadblocks? There's actually I'll answer the question this way, and then maybe you can clarify and kind of redirect me a little bit. But one of the things I want to make sure to get across is some of the great investment opportunities in making AR augmented reality experiences happen today. And I'll go back to that shopping vertical just because it's a great example that we can all relate to. I think one of the big roadblocks here, we've got great hardware and software platforms that are emerging, and people are getting their hands on these devices. But if you go back and you kind of make an analogy to where we were when I was talking about web commerce, suddenly we had 2D versions of products we wanted to buy, and we could portray those online. We're in the same place now with 3D versions of products. And so the challenge that retailers are having now is they say, okay, great. Maybe I want to allow people to have an experience on our Tango device, maybe another AR device, or maybe even a VR device. I understand how to build an Android app or an iOS app, but I need 3D versions of my products. I've got the money because I'm already building 2D versions of these products. But I need someone to help me do this. And there's actually this huge, flash forward 5 or 10 years, what will happen is every manufacturer of a couch will also ship along with it a 3D version of that couch. But today, that's not there. And so that's really holding back the whole retail industry. And there's a few startups that are emerging. IKEA is probably the furthest along in terms of scanning products. You can scan, you can create CAD models, or you can redraw models. But I'll throw that out there both for something for you to invest in, as well as people in the audience to start companies around engines to create 3D assets for both VR and AR experiences.
So let me clarify. So part of the missing gap is actually data models of things, like actually information that's not gaming related, right? The furniture, the things like that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, gaming, you need 3D assets in gaming, and they're actually pretty good at creating those 3D assets.
Yeah, but they're not real world assets you can purchase, right? So there seems to be like a delta between what's created and what's needed for people to go shopping, or some of the examples you gave.
Exactly, and it actually applies to VR as well, I think. If you're in a virtual world, you need those same virtual assets that represent your physical environment.
Alberto, go ahead.
If I may, the only kind of caveat I would like to add is that I think people immediately associate AR with 3D. And again, I don't actually think that there's a lot of experiences on AR that could be 2D. You can have a lot of screens in the air that you can interact with, like, the kind of Minority Report type experience, and we do a lot of that. And actually, the majority of the people that we're working with are not doing a lot of 3D assets today. 3D assets are difficult to create. And the one industry that has been in this space for a long time is gaming and entertainment. Really, those are really the only guys that have been doing a lot of 3D for a long period of time, and therefore that's kind of why it's easy to bring those to VR and to some extent to AR in a 3D space. So.
All right, and question for you. The gesture capture technology is very interesting. What about capturing full body motion, not just hands, for immersive experiences?
Sure. From interaction, the first person point of view, the hand motion is the most important. It's 90% of the action people want to do. We have head tracking by IMU, also 6-off head tracking as well. But I still think the full body motion tracking is needed. First thing is for immersiveness, so I can see myself, see my legs, that's corresponding to my real legs. And second thing is for seeing other people, because VR is about let people feel like this is the real world, not only seeing myself, but other people. So maybe capturing the other people's body movement is important. And the third thing is, in VR, not every person is real. We also need this body capture or body generation generated by AI. So yeah, we believe in VR, one of the and AR most important technology in the next 10 years might be the AI technology, because we experience VR every day. That's when we are dreaming. Half side of the brain generating this virtual world, the other half is playing inside. So to generate a virtual world, really need our brain, really need understanding of the real world, then we can generate virtual characters. So yeah, I think both captured body motion also generated.
So we have one more audience question, and there are quite a few. I really appreciate the audience sending all these. This one is a little out of left field, and we don't have but just a couple minutes for all of us to touch on it. By that I mean all of you to touch on it. I don't want to touch this one. And we're going to start down, Bilal, with you, and we'll just work our way down. Can AR or VR be used to help bridge the severe political divide in the country? Bilal, go for it.
Our PR teams are sitting on our shoulder right now.
I know.
Okay. Well,
We can build walls in VR that may not be real. But I do have to say, there is, I've invested in a company called Pinscreen, and they do face reconstruction, and there's a lot of AI, how you have this thing on your face, whether it's a glasses or a big screen, your face is hidden. How do you recreate that? And if you want to change that, what do you do? And through that, I learned, and I had not understood that the reality today is that we're not colorblind, and we're not, blind to deformities in people. And there's a lot of people. I mean, the biggest, somebody just told me that the fat people get most discriminated in the workplace. Right. I think AR, VR can actually create a lot of bridges across not just political divides and people's, looks and feels, but also, how we interact with each other and mannerisms as well.
So since you did such a good job on that, and you mentioned your PR handlers, we'll give you a free pass because we're going to have to end here. Yes or no, each the four of you, do you think it could be used to bridge the political divide in the country? Eric?
Absolutely.
Abe?
Yes and no.
Okay. Albert? That's a fine. Alberto?
No.
No? This is perfect. You?
Say yes.
All right. Thank you very much. I want to thank all of the panelists. And thank you very much.